Hi, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to The Right Ingredients, Creating Equity Through Food Entrepreneurship, which is one of many events that are part of the week-long festival celebrating the groundbreaking at the Capitol Jewish Museum right here in Washington, D.C. Just this morning, the museum broke ground in Northwest Washington, and come spring 2022, their doors will open, giving us another reason to come together and celebrate. And they said, hopefully in person, I'm reading this opening intro, but we've got to be able to see each other in person by then. So that's what I'm going with. When the museum opens, they will have stories very similar to what we'll be celebrating and discussing tonight. The Capitol Jewish Museum will feature exhibitions, programs, and walking tours that inform and may challenge history we all learned in school. So check out the museum website, and I hope that you'll join the other programs during this week and in the future. The staff will be dropping links into the chat that you'll see on the side of your screen, and they'll be available to answer any kind of general museum questions like where it is and how you get in and stuff like that. So just look for CJM next to their names. So I won't be answering those questions, and neither will our panelists. And lastly, before we begin, I'd like to thank our national sponsor, Moment Magazine, and our sponsors for this event, Shuk and Central Farm Markets, all good people. So the panel is food entrepreneurship and creating food equity in that. And the museum put together a really great group of women whom I all admire. The first one is Danielle Vogel, in no particular order. Danielle Vogel, who's the owner of and founder of Glen's Garden Markets in Washington, D.C. And we've also got Susan Barocas, a good friend of mine, who who did some chef turns at the White House, and she teaches Zoom classes, and she's the founder of the Jewish Food Experience online. And then Ruth Gresser, of course, founder, owner, chef, all-around leader, great person of Pizzeria Paradiso in the Washington, D.C. area. So they're all here. And before I bring them in, I just want to talk a little bit about when we were discussing before the wind-up to this evening about just what food equity is. We thought we'd come up with or give you some sort of guideline for, what we think about what it is and what the Jewish Museum was hoping to get out of this. So the museum staff said food equity is using food as a means of creating equity, of helping others and enriching their community through various ways involving food. Sounds pretty good, right? And food equity is this sort of expansive concept that all people have the ability to grow and to consume healthful, affordable, and culturally significant foods. So when I asked the panelists what they thought about what food equity was, it's like to them it means different things. For Danielle, it's creating a small business that's centered on sustainability, and she's going to talk about that. And for Susan, it's her work in Hesed, which is a synagogue group that feeds those in need and shedding light, and not just Jewish people, by the way. And she hopes to, and she has been, shedding light on a particular sector of Jewish culture that, maybe hasn't gotten to do as much as it should in the United States, but it's up and coming, and it starts with an S. And then Ruth, of course, who has been long advocating for food in the women in the food world and helping those in need, particularly during times of the pandemic. So Danielle, I think we're going to start with you, if that's okay. Hi, everybody. This is the first time I've gotten to see them. So you mentioned in your opening remarks, Danielle, that your approach to business combines Jewish notions of tzedakah and tikkun olam. So can you tell us about that and about a particular program that you're involved with?
Sure. Do you want me to give a little background on what my business is all about first, or just jump into that intersection? Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'll get into that in a minute, actually, because I did a couple of things today, including look at your TED Talk from 2014, which was just
Oh, Lord.
great. So I'll get it in there.
Okay. So essentially my approach to business really stands at the intersection of tzedakah and tikkun olam, which is not like a particularly profitable proposition. But I do think that the best part of creating a small business is that you get to define the rules of debate. And so for me, I moved off of Capitol Hill to open a climate change motivated grocery store. And the most fun part of it is we opened on Earth Day of 2013. But the most fun part is creating a scenario where the world is as it should be and as we intend it to be. And so, you get to create rules that empower and, programs that enrich. And it's not about the way the rest of the world operates and does business and makes profit. But when you are focused on that intersection of tzedakah and tikkun olam, what you can do is create like a truly and robustly equitable ecosystem within your own small business. And I know that Ruth takes a similar approach. And I think that the result is that in our teams, we've built a real family of folks that live our mission and our values, and then in turn, they bring them into the world.
And this is, you took this long turn through the hill, through trying to, create change on your behalf through legal means, through getting a law degree, of course, because it was a family thing, but you come from this generations and generations of grocers. So explain a little bit your sort of one bite at a time message that I picked up from your TED Talk.
Sure. So I have spent my entire career working toward climate change progress. I was on Capitol Hill for a decade. I worked for Democrats, Republicans, and Joe Lieberman in the House and the Senate on committees and personal staffs in the states. And I just obviously we did not pass a comprehensive climate change bill. So in the middle of my time on the Hill, I also worked at the Department of Justice suing power plants for violating the Clean Air Act. And, at the end of the day, I realized that both, litigation and legislation were simply, not moving. It's not even that they were moving too slowly. It's that they were not making forward progress in any way. And so I opened Glen's on Earth Day of 2013 specifically to make incremental climate change progress, to engage our community. I live in DuPont, so to engage our community in the process of making what we call progress one bite at a time. So the idea is that we've made all the decisions and all you have to do is come in and make whatever choices inspire you, because anything you decide to consume in the space is climate positive. And that really, it not only does it transcend the way we think about our business, but it also informs our vendor relationships and all the decisions we make with regard to equipment and waste disposal and everything else. It really permeates soup to nuts the entire business operation.
And your store is solar powered too, is that right?
It is solar powered. So we've oscillated between wind and solar, and we are presently solar powered. Using some DC community solar installations.
Mm-hmm. And I just have to ask the pandemic question. I mean, how rotten was that for you, and how long did it take you to open back up, and what's it been like in the interim?
Yeah. So we are a grocery store, but we're also a cafe and a deli. And basically minute one, we shut the bar down, right down. And the bar is it's nothing compared to Paradiso, but we do have a very cool all local craft beer program. And it's the heartbeat of the store. It's at the front of the store. It's either people on a packed patio or in a full cafe, enjoying local craft beers that represent our mission and our values. And so when that shut down, it is you walk in and you don't have that vibrant center anymore. And then we shut down the deli because in the very beginning, we were very concerned about surface contamination and transmission, all those good things. We didn't know what we know now. And that was our main revenue stream. It was certainly the driver of all of our margin for our business. So we were left with only the grocery store part of the grocery store. And so it's very difficult from a financial perspective, because we had since inception depended on that mix of margin between what we were getting from draft beers and what we were getting from prepared foods, and then what we were able to get from grocery. Now, that being said, we also decided on our own to limit our capacity to, in the beginning, it was 10 people at a time. So we chose to drive down our foot traffic by about 95%, which also didn't help the math much. But look, at the time, the only thing I cared about, and that this hasn't changed, is whether my staff is safe, healthy, and comfortable in the space. Everything else comes second to that. And so that was the business organization that they felt most comfortable with. And every time we've opened up another little piece of the business, and we're nowhere near where we used to be, but, incrementally, we've done it by committee. When we increased our capacity limit from 10 to 15, that was a big conversation about where we felt comfortable, with the understanding that we would go back if we didn't like it. We've only opened the deli for lunch service because we can do that in a way that everybody feels safe and comfortable. But at the end of the day, this business exists to nourish the community while making climate change progress. And we haven't stopped doing that for a single second.
And your Accelerate Her DC program, tell me about that. It's an incubator program?
Yeah, it is. So one of the foundational values of our company is that we grow small businesses along with our own. And in the 8 years that we've been around, we have launched 90 local small food businesses, giving those entrepreneurs their very first chance to sell their products on our shelves. And of those 90, 20 are owned by people of color, and about 60 at this point were founded by women. And so being a hospitable first retailer and giving people some sort of, mentorship and guidance, but also market support is really integral to what we do. And by the way, it also means we get to offer a really special differentiated product mix to our community, which is very cool. But every year we throw ourselves an Earth Day birthday party. And starting in 2018, I added to that celebration a business pitch competition called Accelerate Her DC. And the idea was to identify, incubate, and accelerate the next great lady-led, sustainability-minded, small batch food in our region. And so we put out the call for applications. We got 60 or 70 applications the first year. We put them through a round of judging. I brought together some of the women that I consider to be the most visionary in the sustainable food space in our region. And we invited the finalists to the birthday party to pitch live and do a community tasting. And at the end of the day, I wrote that woman a check for $10,000 out of my pocket.
Wow.
It was a no strings investment. It's really putting my money where my mouth is. And then in addition, we got her a suite of support. So some storytelling advice from one of the judges, some marketing support from one of the judges. I brought her on my radio show, Enviro, Everyday Enviro. And I continued to mentor her for the following year. So that was really cool. So we did it again the next year. And this year, given everything that's going on and sort of the reckoning that our nation is navigating right now, I decided that rather than having this be an annual competition, I wanted to get money into the small batch food community as quickly as possible. So I transitioned it from a competition to a grant program. And so now Accelerate Her DC is a seasonal grant, and we're focusing entirely on women founders of color. So our first two grantees were a company called Lemonade Love and another called Mocktails, both founded by these incredibly brilliant, wonderful women of color from the DC area doing really cool stuff in small batch food. So the applications are open for the next season right now. They'll close at the end of the month. And I'm really looking forward to continuing this, frankly, skill shares program to build each other up.
That's fantastic, really. How do people find out about the program?
It's on our website, and we promote it through our social media. Someday I hope to have a co-sponsor of some sort, so this isn't entirely out of my pocket, and it can be slightly larger amounts. But at the moment, it's kind of a Glen's Garden Market operation.
I have a feeling that you and Ruth, I know Susan, are multi-talented and do many things at the same time. You're used to that. I mean, it's amazing. And I should tell everybody too, what I left out of the intro was, if you have any questions, go ahead and, pass them along to the post and they'll send them to me. We want to try to make this an inclusive conversation. We are going to have a discrete Q&A period at the end, but we'll also, I think we can all handle your questions along the way as well. Everybody's been doing this way too much over the past several months. If I know everybody here, right? So next we're gonna talk to Susan, my buddy Susan Barocas. She didn't immediately seek jobs through cooking. She comes from a multicultural, artsy kind of background with film and media, and a lot of people knew her around town. She was the director of the Washington Jewish Film Festival, and this Jewish Federation of Greater Washington does a lot in the food area. I know that during the pandemic, she's been teaching some Zoom classes, and it's Sephardic cuisine that has your heart, right, Susan?
It is, but it's broader than that. It's non-Ashkenazic, because that's part of that's part of my whole thing about equity, which has to do with cultural equity too. And it's how we kind of lump everything together. Oh, if you're not that, then you're that. So if you're not Ashkenazic, then you're Sephardic. And it's just very sad. And we lose a lot when we do that with any culture. This idea of the melting pot where we're all the same, to be equal doesn't mean to be the same as Eric Fromm years ago said in his book, The Art of Loving. But to be equal means that we recognize our differences, we appreciate each other for our differences, and this is, to me, that is what I need to do with food culture. It's a way that we can honor and remember many different kinds of cultures. And for me especially, it's in the Jewish world. It's Maghreb from North Africa, and Mizrahi from Persia, and Yemenite Jews, all kinds of Judeo-Arabic experiences. And Jews who've been living in Bukhara or Uzbekistan for over 2,000 years. And so they had nothing to do with Spain and Sephardic Jewry, which is my heritage. I'm very proud of it. But I think we have to build a bigger tent, a bigger umbrella when we talk about Jews and when we talk about Jewish food and Jewish culture and Jewish history. So that's a big thing for me, one of my passions. And
So tell me a little bit about how you go about doing your research, because this really is, you don't have a venue like Danielle and Ruth do. So it's really in kind of one bite at a time, one person at a time, but you're doing it through a variety of ways. So, and then we'll get to your Hesed effort.
So the way that I learn, there's lots of people who've been doing research for many years. I try to read it. I use the Library of Congress. I literally try to be a really good food researcher. The biggest way I learn is from talking to people. And I do a lot of talking to people and sharing ideas and sharing knowledge and, trying to figure out where we are and where we need to go with this information and what we're losing, what we need to remember. I also work with a number of organizations. There's a lot of organizations. Now, so when you say Sephardic food, 10, 15 years ago, people were like, Barocas? And that was if they knew Barocas, that was the extent of their knowledge. And that has started to change. And part of that is also because of Israeli food making such a rise, but even the food in Israel has changed. Whereas all these restaurants that used to be strictly Ashkenazic cuisine, now there's all kinds of things happening. Used to be that Yemenite Jews and Moroccan Jews and Iraqi Jews, they ate their food at home. That's where they got to eat it. And now there's restaurants with that kind of food. And that's starting to happen now in the States too. It's spilling over, I think, here, where people really are starting to think about, oh, there's other Jews. It isn't all bagels and lox, and brisket. And I think that is, a really important thing for us as a Jewish community to hang on to and to nurture that and to help pass it on. So as far as the Sephardic goes, that's where my heart lies in terms of cultural equity.
Mm-hmm. So it's synagogue groups online now, in addition to your cooking classes. I mean, you're
Yeah.
talking through what other venues? Lilith, I think?
I talk through magazines like Lilith and organizations, Sephardic and non-Sephardic Jewish organizations. I talk and teach through synagogues, Jewish community centers. I also do cooking like for around town DC, which I think is really important because when I think about the needs of food equity, there's a lot of hungry seniors, and there's a lot of seniors who don't um, know how to make it work during this time. So I also have branched out into doing that, which I think is really important.
That is, it totally is. And, they're feeling so isolated too. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So the food
Yeah.
really does more than nourish their insides, nourishes their soul too. I would imagine when it shows up at their doorsteps.
Well, the Hesed, if we want to talk about getting into the Hesed, that's through Adas Israel Congregation. And it's a really wonderful program. There's Hesed means loving kindness. And so it's a big committee that does many different kinds of acts of loving kindness. I'm focused on the cooking committee, and Bonnie, we love it. You come and cook with us and help quite a bit. Thank you. But it started out that we wanted to provide food for people in the congregation who were sick, housebound, in mourning. And so there's two freezers, and we would just pack them full of soup and challahs and kugels and, honey cakes and whatever. And anyone could come take the food, whether they needed it or somebody else was taking it to someone. Just come and take it. There's never a fee or anything. We've branched out, and I'm really happy. Over the past couple of years, we're providing food for organizations like Friendship Place and Tehran Center, and we have a relationship in West Virginia with a really interesting group that's sheltering people and feeding people. And when we had to empty our freezer at the synagogue, because we knew that we weren't going to be going back there for a while, and we had a lot of food. We packed the car of a volunteer and took it all to West Virginia to this place that was really in need of the food. And so I think for me, it's trying to get the word out to people and trying to provide avenues where people can become involved. I want to make pathways where it's easy for people to become involved in helping the community writ large, in helping their neighbor, in helping, other organizations. And so that's kind of where Hesed's gone. We just did with great awareness of the fact that we have about 150 members at the synagogue who are 80 or older. We just did a honey cake bake-in. We do this bake-a-thon every year of honey cakes, and usually we make about 300 in our social hall. Well, obviously that wasn't happening, so we rejiggered it this year. We cooked in the parking lot, which as Bonnie, as you know, was a lot of fun, a little challenging, but it worked. Right. And we made about, I think our count was 168 honey cakes, and a lot of them have already been delivered by another group of volunteers. And we've been hearing from people how it's cheered them up, how it's made a difference, how it's helping them for this holiday coming up when so many of them are alone. And then next month, we hope to be cooking for a local organization to donate food to a local organization.
Yeah.
So
Very different from the model of the other two women here, but effective in its own way. Thank you for your efforts. And Ruth Gresser, I feel like I've known since I started reporting on food, decades ago in the Washington area. Just watched you become such a mentor and a creator, someone who has not only built up kind of a little mini empire in your restaurants, but also the kind of work that through your restaurants, the kind of the support of women, the support of the arts. Want you to really talk about that. I mean, you've done such a great job for such a long time, and you've been involved in so many organizations. I can't really list them all, but I know that in particular, if you can sort of go through the evolution of how you got most recently, I guess, Women's Food Fest that's coming up very soon, and then sort of work back to your Artworks Now projects and how you got involved in supporting arts through schools. I mean, go for it.
Well, it's funny. I'm listening and feeling like, oh, I don't really have anything to say. I just run a pizza place, which is kind of, I think, part of the reason that we've been successful is because all we really think of ourselves as is a neighborhood pizza place, and the foundation of it was to create a nice place to work and a nice place for customers, and serve good food. And you know,
and you opened in 1991.
In
was
1991. Yeah. So
Yeah.
we're coming up on 29 years, and I'm crossing my fingers.
In a horror, as my grandmother
We
would
make
say.
it to 30. So the foundation, without really recognizing it at the time, I think a lot of it had to do with my Jewish background, and the idea that you should do good in the world, and I wanted to create a good place, just a good place, and I feel like, oddly, through the many years and the numerous people that have come through the restaurant, it's survived. I mean, it's that culture has been continued regardless of how many changes in staffing and how many different locations we've opened. And I think that you were talking about food equity and access and affordability and quality. Those to me are the three elements. And one of the things that was the generation for Pizzeria Paradiso was that I was trained as a French chef, and I was in high-end restaurants cooking, and there was no place for my friends to come and eat. It was too expensive. It wasn't a place for the people that I knew, for the community of which I was a part. And so in opening Pizzeria Paradiso, what I wanted to do was create food of the quality that was in finer establishments, but have it be more accessible to a larger population. So that's kind of the first way that I feel like food equity and I intersected. So the other thing that came to mind is my personal privilege. Like, I've never gone hungry, and for an extended period of time. So I have a very different reality than a large portion of the globe, and we've always been able to access food supplies. The business has never had issues about getting ingredients. And when we first opened, we could price our menu at the time in 1991. We sold a large pizza for, I think, $12.95, $13.95, which at the time was very expensive. And I remember a woman coming in at the time and who was she ordered a to-go pizza, and this was back when I was. For those of you who know the history of Pizzeria Paradiso, we opened in a very small second level townhouse, walk-up townhouse space that sat 35 people. This woman came right after our review where we kind of took off, and she ordered a pizza to go, and she paid $13.95 or whatever it was for this cheese pizza, and she was kind of incensed that she should have to pay that much money for that pizza. And when I think about it, at the time I was just like, I'm sorry. That was the price we had set, and we could do that, and we were able to do that all of these years. Increase prices. Now that $13.95 pizza is now $20, which in almost 30 years is not that huge of an increase if you think about some other things. But what we found, and this brings everything together for me, is a few years ago in 2017, we opened our location in Hyattsville, Maryland. And we opened it in conjunction with Artworks Now, which is an art center that is about arts education and access to creativity. That's their mission. And we did a private-public partnership so we're both in a building together that the arts center would never be able to have afforded on its own. So the kind of retail restaurant supports or subsidizes the space so that the art center can afford to be there. And what I found when I went to Hyattsville, which Prince George's County has been called a food desert. What I found was that the price that I could set in downtown DC was a special night out price in Hyattsville, Maryland. So it was a very different kind of. It was an adjustment for us to understand, the difference in food equity. That close together.
Yeah.
But so to speak a little bit to the other things that you brought up, I feel very strongly in the cultural aspect. I think we're kind of all joining together, as I'm the third one to speak, very strongly about the cultural aspects of food. And I see a similarity between food and art, and have always felt very attuned to the importance of art in society and the importance of food in society, and that's part of why we have such a strong partnership with this art center. I'm also very interested in and have supported women over the years and listening to Danielle and her business model. That's something that I've supported for women in this industry for the last probably 10 to 15 years. I had enough success and enough experience to be able to then mentor others, and the importance of women understanding the business side of the restaurant business has always been very important to me.
Right. I remember having a conversation with you, Ruth, so many years ago, in which you were just saying, it's not about being a great founder of this restaurant. I think it was at your place when you opened in Georgetown. It was telling me that you had to learn how to be an electrician, and you were plumbing toilets, and you were really learning from the ground up. So
right. My spouse calls it this old. They've called it this old restaurant over the years. Yeah.
Yeah. Somebody has asked how Ruth and Danielle have responded to the racial justice movement, and specifically around employment. I mean, let's go pre-pandemic for the moment, and then if you want to sort of say, I mean, it's a little bit, it's just so difficult right now that I just can't even imagine owning a business. But so in the good days when you were hiring who you could hire and doing what you could do, can you talk a little bit about that, Danielle?
Sure. We are a neighborhood grocery store that exists to nourish the neighborhood, and so it should reflect the neighborhood. And it always has. We work very hard to make sure that we are promoting from within, creating empowerment opportunities. And then, of course, I described how that informs our relationships with our producers. So, we've given start to over 20 companies that were founded by people of color in the last 8 years. For me, a big part of food equity is market share. To Susan's point, it's really important for people to be able to find foods that are culturally resonant with their history and their background and their identification. And so as we find emerging producers who are following their passions and creating the foods that they grew up with, and giving them a chance to offer it to our community is, it's a food equity movement.
Ruth?
We also have been generally promote from within. We have always had a diverse staff, and have always had a very open door. I mean, I'm a lesbian, so it's been very important to me that it's a safe community for every kind of individual. We have a predominant Latino or a large portion of our staff has been immigrant and over the years. And
I would
in terms of
a lot of Washington kitchens, right?
Yeah, I mean, I have to say that I feel very fortunate to have opened my business at that, when those two things came together, a large immigrant population. It just worked very well for us. We have we've always treated everyone who's been part of our staff as, in the same way. But the in terms of recent, the pandemic has been so overshadowing kind of a lot of, it is the defining characteristic, or it's the defining piece element of all decisions right now. And at this point, the staffing has contracted, not growing. But we have been represented, I think, by large numbers of our staff have been from all races, all backgrounds, all sexual preferences, and et cetera, throughout our history, because it's been a safe
the social
place.
justice angle, Susan, is something that Jews have been pretty familiar with. I read in a recent Washington Jewish Week profile something you said, which was, and if you don't mind my quoting you, making the most out of rough times is an age-old Jewish experience. I mean, it got me, I mean, Jews have been repeatedly run out of places and compelled to restart and get things going. So it seems like thriving in difficult moments is it's almost genetic. And my hat's off to all of you for restructuring, doing what you had to do to sort of make it through this time. I can't even, like I said, I can't even imagine how difficult it is. Somebody's asked a question, and I think we're sort of minutes away from trying to get to an all open, but for now, Nancy asks, why are there no restaurants in DC Metro that offer Jewish food? Sephardic Italian when ethnic is so popular. A lot of words there. A lot of words there. Ruth, I'm not quite sure that I totally agree with her assessment, but go for it.
Yeah, I'm not sure I agree completely either. And, I think it just hasn't happened yet. I don't know if it's still, DC is used to be behind the food trends. And so maybe it just hasn't, that particular one just hasn't hit as strongly here yet.
I mean, maybe the Jewish deli thing, it sort of comes in.
Now we're catching up, I think, in terms of just awareness, which is the first step. We're really catching up. The interest of people have in Sephardic recipes, in recipes from all the other non-Ashkenazic cultures has really grown. And I think it's just the beginning, because I think it's also part of, we're in a time of recognizing a lot of differences that are beneficial to us, and of saying we can be different and enjoy that difference and be equal. And so across age, color, communities, nationalities, whether you're an immigrant or you're born in America, all of that is starting now, I hope, to start to take a better turn, where we're going to see more interest in, like, you have, Immigrant Kitchen here, for instance. Maybe we'll start to see more interest in those kinds of restaurants, I hope. Well, when we get back to having restaurants do well enough
Danielle,
to want to open up a new one.
Danielle, in your before the pandemic, were there? Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say,
There's a little delay.
What we used to call good staff work on Capitol Hill. Can you hear me now?
Go for it.
Can you hear me? Okay. So I said I'm going to do what we used to call good staff work on Capitol Hill. I think you mentioned that this panel is sponsored by Shuk, which I should point out is kosher. So it's modern Israeli street food. So if you're looking for some, check out Shuk. They do a nice job.
That's really true. And also they're vegan.
Someone's listening.
Which makes it a really easy kosher restaurant. A good restaurant.
Danielle,
Thank you, Danielle.
before the pandemic, did you have people in the neighborhood? Did you have people coming in and looking for more? I mean, for lack of a better word, products that were ethnic?
Do you mean like kosher, or do you mean like ethnic to DC?
No, I mean, like,
what exactly?
Tahini, like various things that you might use to enhance other cuisines than Ashkenazi. Not saying that, I mean, your market is not a Jewish market.
Right. Actually, funny story. I had we call our customers neighbors, but I had a neighbor come in very, very early on to share with me that she was very disappointed that it wasn't a Jewish deli. And I was like, it's a deli owned by a Jew. I don't know what you were hoping for. But we do have a great tahini that comes from a sister team in Philadelphia. It's called Soom. But the fact is, like, our product mix is quite restricted by our locality mandate. So almost everything we sell comes from the states of the Chesapeake Bay watershed. So, we do have, as the years have gone on and as the small batch food scene has developed in DC, we've really been able to build out a pretty robust and complete product mix. But the fact of the matter is, in the very beginning, when we were deeply tied to indigenous production, it was really hard to offer a complete product mix that would have included, more interesting ingredients. But we've come a long way since then, and now we've got all sorts of good stuff.
Well, tell me a little bit about how, if any, your produce has expanded, for example. I mean, that's a
Oh,
pretty
yes.
easy one. Yeah.
Indeed. So in the beginning, it was only exclusively local seasonal produce. So you can imagine that that was amazing this time of year and was treacherous in February. Kale, potatoes, and garlic do not a produce department make. So we had a tough several months every year. And then, ultimately we decided that it was important for us to offer more produce so that we could bring more people into the store and maximize our own change agency. Because the problem was that when people were going elsewhere because we didn't have the banana or we didn't have the avocado, then we lost control over everything in their basket. So, we were trying to figure out how to reconcile what felt like a real paradox at the time. And I did it by going to Whole Foods and standing in the produce department and figuring out what the Glen's Garden Market shopper was buying from Whole Foods. And it's very easy to spot the Glen's Garden Market shopper in Whole Foods because they are dutifully carrying their Glen's Garden Market reusable bag, so I can find my people. And so what I would do is I'd stand in the produce department and I'd watch them walk in, and then I'd sort of trail them at a non-creepy distance and watch what they were shopping for. And what I discovered was that they were shopping for things like, granola and yogurt and kale and apples, but then maybe also they picked up 2 lemons. And what I concluded was the lemons brought them into Whole Foods. And so by maintaining like this rigorous adherence to all local sourcing, what we were doing ultimately was creating a really inconvenient shopping experience for the community. So we had, a long navel-gazing experience where we self-evaluated whether we could live with ourselves if we sold bananas. And in fact, like the original staff uniform was a t-shirt with a banana and a circle and a line through it. That's how like dedicated to no bananas we were. But ultimately we decided that we wanted to sell more granola that we believed in and yogurt that we believed in. So we sold the lemons in order to get people into the store to buy the yogurt and the granola. So now we do sell, an appropriate mix of non-Indigenous produce, but everything that comes in from out of region must be certified fair trade and it must be certified organic. And we don't hold our local providers to those same standards.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Ruth?
Yeah, I just want to jump in with a similar kind of, very different, but similar kind of story about how it was probably maybe 4 years ago, put a pepperoni pizza onto our menu. We had always had pepperoni as a topping choice, but we had never put it, highlighted a Paradiso menu pizza to have pepperoni. And it was the same kind of decision-making process of, should we not, because pepperoni is not an Italian ingredient. And so when we established the menu, we felt strongly that we were going to be, a wood-fired Neapolitan style, but more Italian than American kind of pizza. And so we didn't make a pepperoni pizza. And
Can I stop you for a second?
Yep, sure.
Can I stop you for a second? Did we all know that pepperoni was not an Italian ingredient? Can you get us up to speed on that?
It's an American ingredient. I mean, it's a sausage, and there are lots of different sausages in Italy, but Italians did not create pepperoni. So, so it was not. So we didn't have a menu. I mean, a pizza that had pepperoni, and the response to customers is what I'm kind of getting at, and recognizing, and that brings me to back to food equity and the larger question of the world and how we see food. And I serve a particular customer, and my customer has gotten, with the widespread renown that Pizzeria Paradiso has gotten, my customer comes from all over. And so satisfying that customer became important. And how that customer eats is to put a pepperoni on their pizza. And the idea of what quality level, how do we provide worldwide good quality without becoming industrialized and buy into the industrial food system, which is the unhealthy part of the food equity question. And while the navel gazing, there's the navel gazing of a very small group of food. I don't want to use the word elite because it's been used too much in a negative way.
That's what was coming to mind, however.
Yeah, exactly. But I read something once about sugar is worse. The amount of sugar that's consumed in the world is worse than anything else, and to just decrease the amount of sugar that people consume just slightly would be better, have better health results than all of the sorry, Danielle, all of the like focus on local. But local is now a focus for more for climate reasons.
Right.
That's a whole different question. But there's so many things that just come together, and it starts with who your customer is and how do you provide it in a way that you're comfortable with and they will receive.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Susan?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that as I'm listening to Danielle and Ruth talking, I'm really feeling like there's this thing about community and connection that ties into all of this with what we do, all of us, and with how you view equity, that's a place that you can start. It's a great starting point to connect people, to build community around. And when you do that, for me, I'm involved in an organization also called Hazone, not Mazone, who feeds people in need, which is wonderful, but Hazone, which is involved, it means vision, and it's involved in food justice and access and, equity, the environment, and that's from a Jewish point of view. And I think it's that Jewish law, Jewish ways of life are a wonderful overlay for talking about this idea of equity, and also for the idea of talking about, how do we build from diversity equity? So.
Mm-hmm. Somebody, I mean, it's a little off what we were talking about, but somebody wants to know, how does kosher law fit into equity for the panelists? I'm not an expert on that. Susan probably has more of a background in, kosher dietary law, but in terms of what's kosher, I know that when you're catering, Susan, you have to pay attention to that for some of your clients, but I'm not quite sure that it needs to fit into what any one of us are doing right now. But if you've got any thoughts on that, somebody's asked. Go for it, Danielle.
So I grew up in a kosher home. We were like very conservative, like almost borderline Orthodox. And, frankly, I think that grocery stores that aren't truly kosher trying to play that game for a couple of days a year is just too cute by half. So I've been pretty adamant that we not get involved. My kitchen is like a treif fest. So I'm not going to pretend that I have kosher for Passover food because that might be popular one week. It kills my mother, who's very much still kosher, and both of my sisters have kosher homes. But at the end of the day, it's a climate change motivated grocery store. That's our shtick.
Good for you.
Yeah, and
a lot of those kosher products. I mean, I could get Susan started on this, but we don't even want any of those food processed kosher products anyway. So
yeah. I mean, that's part of the reason why I'm vegetarian. Pescatarian at times, but I think you have to eat real food. And so often the kosher food market has just turned into one big processed mess. But I will say, I went to Kosher Fest last year in Passaic, New Jersey. Yes, there is such a thing, and it's huge in the convention center. I was so surprised. I know you're laughing. I was very surprised, though. There's a whole lot more coming down the pipe that is kosher, fresher, less additives. I mean, they're like getting with it because I think they're responding to the market, is what's happened. And I'm really happy to see it because I think for too long, kosher food, just because it's kosher, got a seal of approval when it was really crappy food. So.
Yeah. Totally.
And Ruth, you've already talked about pepperoni, so we know where you are on the kosher law thing in your restaurant.
Well, I'm from Baltimore, and I wasn't raised in a kosher household because my mother told my father when they got married she was not going to do it, even though he came from one. But the family as a whole always had a crab feast. So, there's there are the special rules in Judaism that that you pick and choose, and I think that the eating at my restaurant means you are going to go outside of your kosher world at all. So if hopefully we can find something that you like. And I
What we
wanted
like
to
about
say,
one of the many things is all that flexibility,
yeah,
It's like,
exactly.
We've explained this to our non-kosher friends every once in a while, like non-Jewish friends too. It's like, yeah, you can believe that, you can do that, it's okay. They still let you in,
Yeah,
it
was part of the reason that I rejected Judaism for a while, because I personally was too black and white. It was like this gray area that so many Jews live in. I was like, I don't know how to do that, so I'm going to go. I'm going to turn my back on it until I realized that it was too much who I am to stay away. And to that, I just want to go back for a second to the idea of community. And I think we've all touched on that. And it's been the key piece for me over the years for Pizzeria Paradiso. It was, I said I wanted to make a place. And what I didn't realize at the time was that what I wanted to make was a kind and respectful place that supported community, and it just created. It came from there, and all of the things that Pizzeria Paradiso and I've done over these 29 years have to do with community, to what we're doing now in the pandemic. And you mentioned with our 10,000 Pizza project, and also even to the Women's Food Fest thing that we're doing next week. Very, 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 because we're running out of time. Can you explain that in short order? Sure. It's sort of a women's, it came from a group of women food business owners coming together and saying, let's do something special. And so we're doing sort of a restaurant kind of week. All the different women-owned businesses are doing a special for the week from the 23rd to the 30th. And as part of it, we are giving back, and we are going to donate the equivalent of 100 meals a day to the community. And it's sort of come and support us as we support the community. So it comes right back to, and the food equity, so many people are struggling right now. And we're all committed to getting through this together. That's terrific. Cool. I mean, as I said earlier, my hat's off to all three of you. Thank you so much for being on this. I've got a little bit more that I need to read and to mention our gracious sponsors again. I want to thank everybody for tuning in to this live stream event, and for Capital Jewish Museum for inviting the four of us. Here's some information I'm reading now, and a few parting surprise gifts for you all. As I mentioned at the start, this is just one of many events taking place during the Capital Jewish Museum Groundbreaking Festival. Tomorrow night, Profs, that's Profs, and Pints will host a lecture on historically Black colleges and universities that rescued dozens of Jewish professors from Europe during the Holocaust. Maybe something not everybody knows.
Typically, Profs and Pints events are $12, but this one's free, thanks to the museum. You can register for this by clicking the link under the event on this website. And I think they're going to put it in the chat as well, so you can see that link. And on Wednesday night, the Capital Jewish Museum and Jewish Museum of Maryland are partnering for the event as Museums as Agents of Change. The panel will discuss how museum community and the Jewish community can both help in the fight for racial equity within our country. I think equity is a recurring theme, I hope. So to register for those events again, you go to capitaljewishmuseum.org/groundbreaking, which is where this live stream is taking place. And finally, be on the lookout for an email from the museum that's coming tonight or tomorrow for everybody who registered. In it, you will find instructions for getting a $5 gift card to one of the Central Farm markets. I'm going to use that in the DC area. This email will also include some fall and high holiday recipes that the Jewish Museum staff asked each of us. Susan, what did you put in there? What was your recipe?
I have no idea. I don't remember. I've done so many recipes. I'm like just sending them out, so I don't know.
I think I put in an apricot kugel. Danielle, how about you?
Mine is an apple cider roast chicken.
Lovely. Ruth?
I put in my mother's blintz recipe.
Nice.
I love blintzes. All right.
Yeah.
Actually,
for
I
break
may
time.
have put in. I may have put in a Sephardic. I think I put in the Sephardic plasa recipe, which is a leek and tomato dish. That's very traditional and Sephardic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a bagel? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
So thank you again. And thanking the Moment Magazine as a national sponsor, Shuk, that vegan kosher restaurant in the DC area, Central Farm Markets. Go visit Glen's Garden Market. Go have a pepperoni pizza. I actually like your potato and pesto pizza myself. At Pizzeria Paradiso, one of Susan Barocas' classes online. Come cook with us at Hesed. It's a lot of fun. In the parking lot, fun. And thank you all very much for joining us this evening.
Thank you, Bonnie. Good job.